Hello and welcome back to FranklinCovey's On Leadership series. My name is Scott Miller and I serve as your guest and host each week. Today we have an encore interview with the leader of FranklinCovey's execution practice, Chris McChesney, who is the author of the #1 best-selling book in that space, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Chris, welcome back to On Leadership.
Thank you, Scott.
Backed by both popular demand and request.
Right
you are
on.
one of the top 3 or 4 most downloaded, listened to interviews in our entire series, so we thought we'd invite you back.
Right on.
You dropped down, had a good ski day in Utah yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Skied at
Loved
Snowbird?
it. Yes.
Tell us about it.
I won't go anywhere else. I'm all snowbird all the time from
That's
now
it.
on. I know
Yesterday
that lack
had a
of
theme,
variety.
though.
You're going to go here.
What was the theme yesterday?
Star Wars.
So you were Leia? You were Princess
storm-
Leia? Or?
stormtrooper.
You were a stormtrooper, yeah. I saw it on your Facebook feed. It was
We
great.
found these fantastic bright white and black jackets,
Yeah.
and then we bought helmets, and then we dressed somebody up as Vader, and
Yeah.
it was ridiculous.
Well, it's good for concussions because it keeps your whole face covered, right? There's no hitting trees or
It
whatever.
was freezing cold. It was like minus 10 degrees. I can't believe that I can open my eyeballs.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Anybody who knows or has seen our previous interview knows that Chris is my brother from another mother. He is been in the firm for, almost 30 years? How long, Chris?
28.
28 years of all of your journeys with Dr. Covey and our organization. I'd offer the pinnacle of your influence and impact and learning has been as the lead author of this #1 best-selling book, The 4 Disciplines.
Yeah, very fortunate.
For those who haven't read this book and have been in a cave or been on an aircraft carrier somewhere, thank you for your service if that's the case. Give us a quick overview of what the book's about, why you and your colleagues wrote it, and the impact it's had in the last 8 or so years.
Thanks, Scott. All right, so 4 Disciplines is a very principle-based framework. And when I say principles, it applies anywhere, in just about any situation, around a set of practices to get something done in the face of competing priorities. So when an organization or an individual has something that's absolutely critical, it's not happening, it requires a change in behavior, their own or someone else's, the first discipline gets you to really narrow the focus and define the target. The second principle is about leverage, understanding, we call them lead measures. What are the things I have to do on a regular basis that I can influence, that predict the outcome? The third discipline is around the visibility of it. Can I see it? Mm-hmm. That scoreboard is critical for cutting through the distractions. And then the fourth piece is accountability. And it's that cadence of accountability, constantly applying force against leverage. And it sounds very simple when I just said it like that quickly, but it's a little bit like lift, thrust, weight, and drag to airplanes. Right? They sound simple, right? The principles were very basic when the Kitty Hawk flew, right? Today, we know a whole lot more about lift, thrust, weight, and drag.
But missing one, it doesn't work.
It comes down, right? And so this is a deep dive on focus, leverage, engagement, and accountability, which unlock one of the hardest things for a leader to do, which is to drive a strategy that requires human buy-in.
So Chris, I reserve that chair for world experts on topics. And because my name's on the program, I get to vote. And it is my judgment, and I think legitimate assessment, that you are the foremost authority in the world on this particular topic, executing strategy. I want you just to own that for a minute.
I'm extraordinarily uncomfortable. My father used to say, he hated the term expert. Here's what I love you, I hate the term. We've done 17 years worth of work with 3,000 companies.
Right.
So we have a lot of context, but
well, it's my show. I get to use the word expert.
Okay.
And in all respect to your father, the foremost authority because of discipline and reps and client engagements. Since you've written the book, hundreds of thousands of copies sold, you're keynoting around the world literally every week. What's your biggest learning after having published the book and working with clients?
Yeah, and this starts to show up in the book a little bit. It's the connection between execution and human engagement.
Yeah.
And it's because we weren't thinking about that at all. We were the results side of the FranklinCovey continuum, right? We were the pointy stick. And we were not your father's FranklinCovey. And everything that we did was aimed at the goal and at leverage and metrics. And what came out were some very profound insights around why every human being engages or doesn't engage. And it's different from what the popular set of beliefs are on that topic. But our findings are not unique. There are other people out there that have found the same thing, and it's the connection between execution and engagement. We don't just think is an important leadership topic. We think it's the most important leadership topic.
Keep going. No, please keep going.
Yeah, because ultimately, you can sort of do two things as a leader, right? You got your processes that you can put in place. You can do all the stuff you can do because you're the boss. You put your processes in place.
You call it stroke of the pen.
Yeah, stroke of the pen. All of those things that you can do, and you can do a lot. You can direct energy. You can firefight. But there are some things, and every leader knows this, that they're not going to happen if I don't get people's engagement. If they don't care, this won't work. And that's the wall that leaders hit. And that's why this is such a critical topic, because you realize as a leader, you can only go so far if they're not really engaged. That's why I think that's why the topic of engagement is as big a topic as it is.
And related to that, what have you found is the key or the keys that drive engagement?
Okay, and I'm going to go there really quick. First, I want to say what it isn't.
Okay, what it's not.
What it's not. It's not the stuff that we think of associated with turnover, like the reverse of that. Like when you, it's a really easy place to go.
Your boss, hating your boss.
I don't like my boss. I don't like my work conditions. I don't like
culture.
my pay. I don't like my benefits.
Yep.
All of those things, best friend at work, right? All of those things really lead to turnover. That is good data. That is good research on turnover.
And if you're trying to solve that, focus on that.
Amen. But the opposite of turnover is not engagement.
Different problem,
It's a
different
different
solution.
set, yeah. And it took us a little while to find it, but Frederick Hertzberg, and people that have taken organizational behavior development classes always see this guy. You may have even bumped into him in your MBA. In the 1960s, Hertzberg came up with this two-factor model, and he called them satisfiers and dissatisfiers. And what he says is, they quit over the dissatisfiers, and they really do. But the satisfiers are different. The satisfiers have to do with the work itself, and there's no getting away from that. And it has to do with making progress towards something that matters. And it's those two dynamics, right? Recognition for that, involvement in that. That is a different set of items.
Feeling like you're winning, understanding.
And that's the word we
you
use.
are.
And we even before running into this data, we started calling it creating a high stakes winnable game. Right? Am I winning at something that's really high stakes? That was the way that we saw it.
And that's important because you can create a winning game that doesn't have enormous impact on the organization all day long.
Yeah,
You can win.
or to someone, right. It doesn't have to, high stakes was an interesting thing. It didn't necessarily have giant social value. It wasn't changing the world. Like, it didn't have to. It just had to matter somewhere, to someone, and usually to the organization. And so this realization that, okay, whenever you set this up, you get the engagement. The Harvard Business Review article, The Power of Small Wins, May 2011, that was a really important one for us to sort of zero in on and say, oh, this is what we're experiencing. Because it was an accidental byproduct of great execution, was this pop in engagement. It didn't happen necessarily up front, but the minute they felt like they were winning and it mattered, it always showed up. It didn't matter how jaded you thought they were, didn't matter the culture, didn't matter the history. The minute you had those two factors, you got engagement. And it's not a well understood principle.
Chris, as you think about, and you are thinking about updating this book, because the publisher's been asking for it, a lot of your clients, have you considered creating an edition that has these insights in it?
That concept is really through it. The second book is called Leading Execution. Right. 4 Disciplines was really written for where the work gets done, for the cells of the organization. But those cells live in a system. We've learned that there's cellular execution and there's systemic execution.
Take that deeper. That's a new concept to me.
Yeah. So if you were trying to treat cancer without an understanding of what happened inside the cell, you wouldn't get very far.
Right.
Execution's a lot the same way. That stroke of the pen stuff, that has a lot of systemic across the organization application. But sometimes you got to have energy from the cell. Right? And that's really what this is. It's what's problematic is this is cellular execution. People take that cellular execution and they try and apply it systemically. So you have these executives of giant companies trying to run the 4 disciplines like they were a frontline team, and they just get a little frustrated. I mean, some of the principles are applicable, but they're 2 different things. And so the new book, Leading Execution, is more about that. But this topic of engagement is critical because systemically, sometimes a leader realizes this strategy doesn't work if we don't get energy from the cells. And I can't just do it with new procedures and processes. I can't just do it with money, right? I can't just do it by beating a drum louder. I've actually got to create some pull. I got to get some energy out of the cell.
People need to change some behaviors. They need to do some things differently.
And it's an overused word, but they've got to engage. Yeah. So we did this study for in the manufacturing area, production operations, and we looked at 5 organizations that had extraordinary results with this. We become the student pretty quickly once you give people these principles. And 2 of these entities were claiming billion dollar ROI cost savings from doing this over the period of 6 or 7 years. And we had no idea that anybody was out there on that level. So as we went back and we started learning from them, all 5 organizations had a different way of talking about it. They all had their different constructs, except for one thing was common across all of them. And it was small wins. And so we've got, anybody's interested in the white paper, hit us up, we'll send you one. But in every case, they all have a quote that sounds like it's the same quote, and it's unexpected. And they'll say, what really got us were these $15,000 and $20,000 projects, or these 50,000 is small in their worlds, that just kept showing up. And what you're reading is cellular execution. It wasn't these, and they say this, they say, it wasn't these giant, bold leadership moves. They were getting energy out of the cell.
Wow. We'll include that white paper with this newsletter interview as a tool.
Thank you.
So I've seen you and heard you talk about a term called people-focused leaders versus results-focused leaders. Put some meat on that bone.
Yeah. So this is interesting.
Is it one or the other? Or?
No. But there's a dynamic here. So as I look at the wall and I look at all the books, right? Anything.
You're up there.
Yeah, you're right behind your head, right. Which I think it's blocking it most of the time. I don't know if we can change camera angle on that. If you were part of a big organization, you were switching from one division to the next. And the people in your new division that you're about to take over called the people that were working for you. And they said, what's it like to work for Scott? Mm-hmm. And the people that had been working with you said, oh, he's great. Scott's very results focused. There'll be an audible on the other end. Right. Even though everybody knows,
cost,
but everybody knows that they're not 2 different things. Like you got to be results focused and you got to be people's focused. But it's funny. But if that same person said, oh, what's Scott like? Oh, Scott's great. He's very people focused. They're going to hear the Now, what's funny is senior management.
He won't be there very long.
Right, because senior management looks at, if the senior leaders, the vice president said, hey, what's Scott like to work for? And they said, oh, he's very results focused.
Yes,
he's very people, right? And they should be the same. We have never met a thoughtful leader who didn't know that the results had to come from the people. But what we see is that they tend to lean one way or the other. And the common thinking,
each of us has a natural proclivity.
Default. Yes, we do, right? Here was the shocking thing. The people stuff, in the cases that we worked with, came from getting results. The engagement, the camaraderie, the powerful experience, the culture shift followed the results. Even though so much of the leadership canon that's out there, and rightfully so, that's why I chose to work. That's why I worked for FranklinCovey for 4 months for free, right? Because I love the whole premise behind leadership development. But what we experienced was when you go when you set up a team in a way that they can achieve something, when it actually starts with the results, the engagement always comes along for the ride if you do it right.
So Chris, you have dedicated the last 15 plus years to this singular topic. You have, delivered hundreds, if not thousands, of implementations around the world. I follow you on Instagram and on all your. It's impressive your dedication to the topic. What have you learned about what leaders that are leaving a legacy, that are influencing, that are bringing significant, important focus to bear on solving problems with execution methodology? What are they doing? What do they have in common?
It's so funny
people.
You're asking this question because a lot of times when I speak or I meet a group, I get to hear the leaders talk to their organization before I talk.
Yeah, right.
Right? So everybody loves to have me sort of
and
close.
You're tempted to either rag on them or lead.
No, not at all. You're always trying to help them. But you see a variety of leadership styles and you really get to see them while they present strategy.
Right.
And I was literally sitting at one of these thinking, Chris, you should be learning something. You're getting front row seats to more leaders, that, I don't know who, right? But a lot. And there is a pattern. There's a few organizations out there that are just unbelievable, and it starts with their leaders. A lot of people know about Wegmans, the grocery store.
Sure.
Huge 40X users. We've spent a lot of time with them. They were number 2 behind Google and most
always
respected.
Always in the top 3 or 4 best places to work, most respected. Yes. Yeah.
And
their olive bar is amazing. Have you seen that? I don't love olives, but I mean, their olive bar.
I love that you've been in there.
Oh, yeah. I'm in New York,
If you go, right, they'll teach you about cheeses. They'll tell you how to cook sushi. Right? They do the whole thing. If you look at these leaders, you don't have to look at them for long. You see 2 things. You see really high expectations that they have for their people. Not in a twisting the knife kind of a way, but literally, and they do it to you. When you work with them, you get this same mojo. Like they look at you and they like believe you can do anything.
They hire for that or they train to that?
I don't know. It's just soaked in the culture.
Okay.
I don't even know they see it, but they just look at you and they convince you can do anything. They have these high expectations, which could make you snap.
Yeah.
Right?
It can be also dangerous if you don't have the preparation or the skill to actually go do that.
And I don't think those people stay.
Yeah, right.
But here's the other thing. The other side of that is they also kind of radiate love. And on Christmas Eve, they're not at their cabin in Aspen. I mean, they're richer than Midas. I mean, I can't even comprehend how much that organization is worth that they own. They're not at Aspen. They're in a van in the cold, in the Northeast, going store to store, delivering presents to their people. And it's this, but then think about this, think about every great parent that you've ever known or anybody's ever talked about. Those 2 components of love and expectation are always there. And so this is such a simple leadership model, but you start to see this. And so I think maybe that if that's the high law and the little model, right? The next one would then be to say, okay, and we love at FranklinCovey, we love the notion that intent counts more than technique. From Mahan Khalsa. Yes, I know. It's why they tolerate us.
Exactly.
That's the only reason we're still here.
What I meant to say was what I meant to do.
I know, and they keep putting up with us. If the intent behind anything you want to execute, okay, starting with expectations and love. If the intent then behind anything you want to execute is, we want this to feel like a very high stakes, winnable game. And if it doesn't, say so. Like every leader can do that. That's not soft leadership.
Because you can still have fun and be emotionally invested in something and be smart and relevant and hardworking. And,
yeah. Well, and here's the other point. 80% of what you're doing could be brutal. Like whirlwind, tough. People can
quagmire.
Solving 80% can be hard if there's somewhere in there that you feel like you're playing a high stakes winnable game.
Yeah.
You'll tolerate not only tolerate, you'll thrive. So for leaders, sometimes I think we'll bolt from that because so much
can be your refuge, can be your beacon.
So much of what happens is hard, and we're in a losing market, and we've got inferior products, and we don't have the resources, and I mean, there are so many things telling you can't do this, that people tend to pull away from it. But just to recognize, all right, the situation is what the situation is. And the whirlwind is what the whirlwind is. And I got this team working for me. And somewhere in there, there's a winnable game that's going to matter. So it doesn't have to be the whole game, but somewhere in there, what's a number? Sports metaphor, sorry. Let's go on offense. So much of the business world feels like we had a lousy Super Bowl this year because it was all defense. Like in the third quarter, they're talking about what a great punt they had.
The halftime show I hear. Sorry.
Yeah, right. But,
sorry, Adam.
Yeah. The ADHD just went off. I had so many punchlines went through my mind when you said that. But it was, sometimes people feel like, just let me get to Friday without another shoe dropping.
Yeah.
Can I just endure this? That's what it feels like to just play defense all the time. Can we go on offense?
Chris, address the converse. When you go into organizations that hire you, and you see some leaders that are well-intended, but they're poor. They're trying to get better. They're dropping the ball. They're not executing. Are there some commonalities? They're fine people character-wise. What are some common things that people might identify to say, gosh, I do that, I should stop doing that or change?
The really scary part is I see them all in myself. And I'm not just, this is not fake humility. You know I don't suffer from that.
Yeah.
It's this word with a D right there. Because it'll sound good. Like when you hear the 4 disciplines don't give you discipline, they demand them. And you hear the constructs and you're like, yes, I get it now. I can see it. It's like revelatory.
Is it
but then you got to do
no?
it.
Is it?
Well, each one has its own problem. And so sometimes it's saying, it's saying no to good ideas in the first discipline.
So leaders who aren't executing well are typically doing what things?
They're saying yes to everything.
Saying yes to everything.
Their
own ideas or the ideas that come from them all the time?
Both. And I see this in myself, self-conscious and very aware of what other people think of them. There is some courage that is required to be a great leader. Every great operator.
Because yes creates affinity or respect or
just not looking at the result, looking at how I'm seen. They're not the same thing. A leader can be very aware of their image in an organization and be doing a lot of the same thing as someone focused on the results, but they ultimately differ.
I see.
And when a leader is ultimately focused on the results, they're not always popular. But if you look at somebody that's got a great
Doesn't mean
track
they don't
record,
care about their brand or
No.
image. They're just laser focused on accomplishing this vital.
First, sometimes at the sake of.
What else?
The weekly disciplines of moving off of urgent things. I don't know this sounds so, but it's like the universal DNA flaw that in the moment, I always want to do urgent. It could be a little thing, it could be opening an email, it could be a project. I will always, if I can push an important activity to do an urgent activity, I want to. And it's the discipline to override that conditioning in the brain and say, all right, I can't afford to, but I'm going to give 6 hours right here. I'm going to be on it. I mean, that is so the saying no, the not being too concerned about your own image, and then the ability to just lock down on important things that are not urgent for significant periods of time. That's another one.
Chris, I know you well, and I also knew Stephen Covey well. And although you have nothing in common in terms of personality or delivery style, I have to tell you.
Or success. Or intelligence.
Or net worth.
Especially net worth.
Sorry. I do see you channeling a lot of Stephen's thoughts and principles and sort of modernizing them in a way that the next generation of leader can understand. It's a compliment to him and to you.
No, that is like, to me, that's the highest compliment.
I'm giving you an honorary on leadership doctorate right now. It's worth nothing.
You know what we've had pointed out to us? We didn't make this observation, but we've had several real students of Stephen Covey out there that have said, you took habits 1, 2, and 3 and coded them for the team and the organization.
Well said. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is if you look at Stephen M.R.'s work on Speed of Trust, he's done the same thing with 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
And
you find a lot of clients to that point that choose to engage you in both of those solutions, building a culture of disciplined execution while after they're building a culture of trust. Because you need both.
That's right.
Tell us what the integration of those is. When you have organizations that are solely focused on the invaluable processes here, but lack this personal trustworthy, what happens?
And it's so interesting, the speed of trust. Everybody just goes to the word trust and they sort of skip over the speed of.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Like that is with me. Every time something's slow, every time something's frustrating in my life, it's a trust issue that's behind it. And I just think, I think of Stephen,
Well
every
said.
time,
Yeah.
I can't get in because I can't
Even in
remember
the
the
company.
password.
Even in the company,
I can't
right?
get something. Oh, it's
Yeah,
everywhere.
you and me sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Everywhere there's a slow up, it's trust.
Yeah.
And I think every time it happens, I go, sucker was right
What,
again.
what are Chris's motives? What's Scott intend?
Yeah.
What is he thinking?
That is the lubricant
Yeah.
for this. I mean, you can run
Yeah.
this in a bad trust organization, but it grinds the gears a little bit, right? Now, the converse is also true. When people, holy cow, when people are clear on objectives, the impact culturally is dynamic. You have 46 teams in the IT group at Comcast, nailed, crushed a critical objective for the organization. I was there at the report out. They were showing up in superhero outfits. There were inside jokes. I watched 46 5-minute report outs. Didn't understand a word of it because it was all IT people. And they were brilliant, and they were from different parts of the world. And about every third report out, they would talk about the improvement in collaboration and how great it was not to feel like people were pointing fingers and you didn't have to point fingers. And it just was this theme. And it kept, 46 report outs, about 20 of 15, 20 of them we never talked about that. We never talked about culture. We never talked about interdepartmental collaboration. Right. We never talked about cooperation. We just lined up the targets and got the alignment right and a lot of good things. So they really affect each other.
You may have just answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
When you have high hopes for a client, they call you, you go in and give a keynote speech, you get them riled up, they decide to adopt the solution, and then they fail. And they don't meet your expectation of what your vision was for your partnership. What's happened?
Boy, these are hard questions.
Did you just answer it?
No. I mean, maybe. It could be related. It tends to be the distraction of senior leaders. They just couldn't.
Because senior leaders are well-intended, but they keep cooking up new ideas. They don't support them.
They might have gotten changed out.
I see. The sponsor, the
Sponsor
ambassador
could have
of it
been moved
on.
Right.
And it loses the momentum.
Or they were a little more dialed into the politics of the moment,
Okay.
what's happening in the organization, or they thought they would sort of pass this down.
Yes.
They would delegate
Right.
execution. Yeah. And there's some things that senior leaders, it doesn't have to take a ton of time, but they can't be delegated. There's certain things a leader has to do to keep the engine running, and nobody gets past.
So conversely, are the most successful engagements those that happen because the leader owns it, stays in the role, sees it through, drives it, delegates as appropriate but not entirely? Is that why they're most successful?
Yeah,
Wow.
To the point where we're going to do this, like win or lose. Like there's this mental, that feeling when you've committed to a project, and you know that you're bumping up against crazy, a little bit. Like you're saying, I am so in right now. Like if this doesn't work, not to the disciplines, but to the goal. There's a level of commitment to the target to get through an organization, to get an organization to execute. The example I just gave, Michael Cristofero at Comcast, he didn't cut himself any slack. He was on topic.
Close out in the final thought. I don't want to have a spoiler alert. What's next? You talked a bit about a revised new book. Talk a little more about that. What are you seeing involved in that book? What's next for you and your co-authors and team?
If this is cellular execution,
the current version of the
current version,
right?
Right. What do leaders really need to know to foster and grow this in an organizational setting?
You called the working title
Leading Execution.
Leading Execution. It's aimed at senior leaders, executive level leaders.
Leaders who have multiple teams reporting to them,
right?
Or people who aspire to one day have multiple teams reporting to them. How do I harness this? How do I align it? And over the last 20 years, we've learned a lot about this that's not in there. And if that takes another 10 years, we think it's pretty significant.
Last question. This is self-serving, but I think it's valuable for our viewers and our clients. When an organization is having an upcoming sales conference, annual meeting, some kind of event where they're looking for a keynote speaker, when is it right to have you do that? Like what's the right environment for someone who's an event planner or CEO who's thinking, I like your energy, I like his message, I want to bring him in. I'm going to guess you're not right for every event, every organization. When is the timing right to bring you in and pay your fee, to have you inspire the team and perhaps tip the point towards execution?
I'll tell you the 2 reasons they do hire.
Great.
One is they're really interested to see if this will take in the culture.
Right.
And they
a bit of a
want
trial balloon.
Yeah.
Right.
And they want to just sort of put it out
Yes.
there like a sonar
Right.
bing.
Great.
And just see what comes back.
And you've seen that.
Marriott started this way.
And you've seen CEOs call you to say, I'm thinking of this, we want to use this as a trial balloon, do your thing, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And sometimes they've got an agenda, sometimes they just want to see what interest pops up, but they like the concept and they think, if I liked it, right, let's see what
CEO or whoever read the book, senior leadership read the book.
Right.
Got it.
The other scenario, they have no intention of implementing the methodology as an operating system, but they like the concepts. And they're as almost every conference you go to, they're rolling out the next year's plan, the next year's strategy. And so they want the theme of execution. They're not necessarily interested in institutionalizing an operating system, but they want everybody thinking about the principles of execution to go along, because they know the strategy is no good if we as an organization don't execute. So that's more of a sort of a philosophical, hey, let's get some of the best stuff on the planet around strategy execution to close out, the new direction, this year's plan.
Yeah, makes sense. What's your sweet spot on stage? An hour?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half, 90 minutes is your sweet spot.
Yeah. And what we found about this content is you don't just have to tell stories. It's so relevant to every leader that you can actually teach a lot of information and keep people highly engaged, because it is so personal, and the issues, the dynamics, every leader there is dealing with them. And so we go hour and a half, we teach a lot, and it's engaging because it's very relevant to what they're dealing with.
Chris, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Great conversation. Good luck on your flight home.
Thank
Keep
you.
your Stormtrooper costume for next year's snowboard.
I have a little trouble getting on the plane with that.
That's great. We'll have you back again as well when your book comes out, the next version, but
Right
we'll
on.
have you back between now and then as
All right.
well. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for joining us today. This week's newsletter comes out on Tuesdays. We'll make sure that we have Chris McChesney's white paper in there, and we'll see you back here next week for our next conversation on leadership. Thanks for joining us.